journey. So I think you're going to be inspired if if you're anything like me and not about quality, you'll find it's very complementary to the work that we do. And it really helps organize thinking around how to focus on what's most important.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
And I notice almost no one has their cameras turned on. It should be awesome to see some of you if you're willing to do that, but if not, totally get it. Okay.
Not, you're stuck with me.
There we go. All right. Perfect.
I would like to encourage everybody to share their video. This is all about building relationships. So if you're not too shy, not camera shy, please feel free to share your video with us.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. So I've actually started 6 companies from scratch. And in the 80s, I actually played in a rock and roll band over 300 nights a year playing guitar and singing. That was my main source of income. Record label offers, it was really cool. But I actually liked running companies even more. And I kept going down that path. The company I'm going to show you a little bit about my background to start this. Was Able Engineering and Able Aerospace. Founded that company back in '95. And when I sold it in 2016, we were about $100 million business, and it was a really nice 9-figure exit. And the way things were run, the quality, the approach to everything that we did, it was aerospace. So quality is absolutely everything. It's a ticket to play. If you get one thing wrong, it could crush the entire business. And we were in the aviation aftermarket business, and we had hundreds of millions of hours in our parts cumulatively flying without one single in-service failure that caused an aircraft to have to come out of service early or come out of the air. So fantastic record. We had helicopter customers all over the world, large fixed wing operators, everything commercial. So Delta, American, Korean Air, I mean, all of these airlines all over the world were our customers, as well as the large helicopter operators. And, kind of going through the journey and what it looks like. This is 2006. We had this nice little 54,000 square foot building, nice clean floor, a lot of shells, not really that remarkable. And then you fast forward 4 years, the exact same camera angle. We built a boat in a bottle here, looking at the place. Put mezzanine everywhere we could. So now the 54,000 square foot building is 74,000 square feet, and you couldn't be over 5'10" to work upstairs because we just didn't have the room. And we took over 2 additional buildings on the street. And then fast forward 3 years, we designed from scratch and built this 200,000 square foot building at the Phoenix Mesa Gateway Airport. And I took this picture with my iPhone on a Wednesday afternoon. We started moving in Monday that week. So in 3 days, we were 85% operational. The company that bought us, which was Textron, said we couldn't have done that in 3 months if we tried. How did you do it? And it kind of gets to culture. And when you have everybody just fully engaged and going for it, we probably would have got there in 2 days. But the first day, the trucking company to move everything, we just pushed them out of the way at the beginning of day 2, and we loaded and unloaded all the trucks, didn't have them do anything because they were going too slow for us, whipping through it. So pretty cool. If you were to look at this picture today, you wouldn't see most of the floor because it's covered in mezzanine. It was too small as we moved in. We took over 3 additional buildings in and around the airport. So high growth, lots of new employees, pretty incredible journey. And then some of the things that we did to encourage, employee engagement, actually designed and built into that building a 10,000 square foot wellness facility. And we had full-time functional movement trainers. And we told the employees, if you train 2 days a week for an entire month, we'll pay 100% of the health insurance premium the following month. And if you don't, that's okay. You'll pay 20%. We'll still pay 80%, which was a pretty good deal. And we also told them, if you bring your spouses, and every day I would watch dozens of spouses come in and out of the program, we'll put more money in your paycheck. And if you bring your kids and get them in our kids programs, we'll put even more money in your paycheck. So we got a really good handle on the wellness of our employees. And then the next piece of it were their family members. And so the net effect of this, it was about $600,000 a year with roughly a little over 500 employees to maintain the program. And that didn't include the money we were paying them extra to come and train. And we ended up saving $1.5 million on healthcare spend because we were self-insured doing this. But more than that, it increased productivity, teamwork, collaboration, communication, emotional, mental, physical energy significantly higher. The most productive employees were participating. And it was interesting. We had, with 500 employees, we had about 360 qualifying for the program. So pretty incredible. But the other part about it, until we started, and we were smaller because this is probably 5 years into the program, until we started compensating or incenting people to be there, the numbers were significantly less. So anyway, interesting way of running at that. We actually also looked at every single employee, and these dots represent 500 employees. We measured everybody on culture on the vertical axis and performance on the horizontal. So, what's interesting to me when I look at performance management or performance evaluation systems in most organizations, regardless of performance, almost everybody is in that upper right-hand corner, whether the company's, knocking it out of the park or not. So this provided lots of opportunities to improve. And every core product we chose to focus on, we beat everybody on the planet, even with all this opportunity to improve. And I told the employees, if you're in the upper left-hand corner, high-end culture, really a good fit there. They're just in the wrong seat. We almost always found something else for them to do. And those employees that are in the lower left-hand corner, they knew exactly where they stood and what was expected 100% of the time. And we would transition them to another company, i.e. help them find another job that was a better fit for them. And we always, as a policy, we would follow the employees for at least a year after they left. And it's the right thing to do. And also when employees leave, sometimes they can give bad reviews and do other things. So it's the most caring thing that you can do. It's the right thing to do. It's supporting them all the way through, and it should never be a surprise when it happens. And then one of the things that I said to the employees, and I was only partially kidding, mostly serious, if you're high performance and low culture, if we can find these people a job at our strongest competitors, I would give you a bonus. And if you can make them a vice president, I'll give you a company car and a parking space, because they can go suck the life force out of those companies rather than continuing to do it to us, in there. So it was really a great way to be really clear on where you stand and what's expected and what to do with certain types of employees. And even some of the most disgruntled employees, when they left, they were sort of in this lower left-hand corner, following them for a year or more. Next thing I know, they're sending us business. Before we followed them, they're doing everything they can to turn us off in the quality system at the airline that they went to work for. So that was an interesting lesson for me early on. And one of the things that was really important to me through this entire journey was, essentially connecting culture to financial results. What does that really mean? Everybody talks about culture. It does feel kind of fluffy. We have a lot of wallpaper around the facility. We have values, we have a mission, we have all this stuff. But culture, it really does matter. Leadership matters most because we're driving it. Inside the Able group of companies, when I sold it, every single employee, I didn't care that they knew what our mission was or what our behaviors were, or our vision or quality policy. What I cared about is that they knew how to apply it to measurably improve customer experience, internal and external, and profitability. So our mission statement, and I'll remember it, all the way to the end, was to safely reduce aircraft operating costs by providing resourceful component repair, overhaul, and approved replacement parts solutions. Every employee not only knew that, but at least once a year, they had one example of where they applied it to measurably improve customer experience and or profitability. So that's how we took and objectively sort of connected culture to financial results and evaluated each employee on that stuff. Pretty interesting. And I've talked to a number of senior leaders in other companies. Honeywell is one. And I was interviewing somebody to run, a senior leadership role inside the business. And He said, yeah, we have 12 values, they're incredible. It's what makes us so strong. I said, wow, I'm super fascinated by this. Please tell me what it is. And he didn't know what one of them were. So I thought that was interesting. I think that's kind of a common story out there. So they need to be living and breathing. And I believe that, culture essentially is made up of the beliefs, accountability, practices, and decisions from which an organization creates value. So whatever your mission or purpose or behaviors, whatever that stuff is that you come up with, it really comes down to those four things. That's what I've seen. And there's a lot of interesting, and we can provide some of that too if there's interest here with the team, but a lot of interesting survey questions that we've come up with over the years to figure out which part of the organization is causing the biggest gaps in performance, specifically financial performance. And that's where we do the diagnostic work to make that happen. So back to what I said in the beginning, I think the biggest challenge that we're solving for is how do we get teams to consistently create more value over time? So what would be a simple operating methodology that will work for 80% of all teams? Interesting story with my aerospace companies. I've been involved in CEO peer advisory groups for a lot of years. I was in Vistage for about 17 years, plus part of different groups over the years. And it was probably 2010, 2011, I had about 3 dozen of my friends say, man, we really want your results because we're growing fast. Everything's great. They tour the company and they ask the question, how do you get every employee to act like they're the CEO of their own role? They know the numbers. They're passionately involved in improving it. Oh, it's really simple. Go do this. And oh, by the way, we built software because one of the 3 companies that I built around aerospace was Able Systems and Technology, and it was to build the ERP to run everything. So I gave it to those leaders, let them run with it, and literally, I think one of them was able to do it. And what I realized is that what works for one leader, it doesn't matter who it is. When they're a star, you can't just copy what they do and do it. It worked because it was that leader. And so I just believe the right leader can make anything work. So I set out on this journey. How do I come up with something that will work for 80% of all teams? And I believe we've gotten there, and we'll see an example of that here in a bit. The path of success, probably all of you have seen some graphic like this before, but it definitely is not a straight line. It's a crazy path, but you can absolutely straighten it out and make it not the typical story and how to actually get there. Now, a couple of myths that I'd like to go through here. There's 6 business myths that a lot of consultants and leaders will tell you are absolutes, and they absolutely work. But they're really not. They're a myth as I've experienced actually going through them. And one of them is we have this amazing business idea, this incredible team to execute on it. That's all that matters. And it's just simply not the truth. Having a great idea, a great team, it doesn't mean they know actually how to work together to make it happen. It just doesn't. And I've seen a lot of startup companies, they raise a ton of money, they start moving along, and they hire these really expensive executives with great pedigrees. They can't work together to save themselves, and the whole thing comes crashing down. So execution really is more important than ideas. It doesn't mean if you've got a great team, they know how to work together. It's really about what you choose to work on once you identify the work that you can do, the right work, right order, right time, that kind of stuff going through. So that's one myth, and I hear it a lot. We work with companies across the board, services, manufacturing, construction. This stuff that we're going to go through really applies to any type of organization, including financial organizations. So next myth, meetings get in the way of real work being done. I find that a lot. I'll attend some meetings initially, and you can just watch people checking out as other people are checking in. I wish I didn't have to go to a meeting. I mean, most meetings, if you were to really evaluate it, how much value are you getting out of it? The majority of people would say, I wish I didn't have half the meetings. I don't even know why I'm there. There's no agenda, et cetera. But meetings, I mean, it's such an incredible opportunity as a team to make choices that will allow you to accelerate value creation. So what do you do in that meeting? How do you structure it? And, it was interesting being part of, several parts of, larger companies just sort of going in and doing work. And you would think that they would really have their act together when it's large, but you've got a senior leader managing a couple $billion-dollar part of a business, and the team gets together every week. Okay, what do you got? What's going on in your world? What's happening over here? No structure to it at all. It's like, oh my gosh, we're wasting so much time there. So I think it's important to have a methodology in meetings that does a lot of really good things to develop the team and make better decisions to create value. Another myth here, more data will help us make better decisions every time. I've seen too many examples of too much data, or data that's being gamed. I can look at one of the companies that I sold, and when I left, our on-time delivery or turnaround time when something hit the back door, whether it was one part or 1,000 parts in an assembly, on average, we got it back out in 28 days. Incredible, just incredible. And I could see a path to 14, super complex, because it has to break off and go into electroplating and non-destructive testing and hit the engineering department, all of it. I could see a path to 14. Today, it's 120 days. And the KPI to say whether it's on track or off track was increased to 130 days to make it look green. So data is really interesting. Somebody shows me a green KPI, we're on track. It doesn't mean that we actually are. So it's really got to be the right data that we're looking at. And how do you know? And I think the way that and we're going to get into this in the MIND methodology, where every single team has a most important number, and everything you do needs to be improving that number. And that's one great way to know whether or not you have the right measures and right goals, right actions, etc.
Can I pop in for a second?
Please.
Yeah, one of the things on that last myth that's interesting with some of our clients and companies I've worked with in the past is, they get so proud of all those KPIs and the data, and I simply can ask one question, how do you make decisions with this data? And then it's like, ooh. So sometimes it's, they do a great job collecting it, but then if they can't make decisions from it, it really isn't serving the purpose that it could.
Yeah, that's a great question. How is this driving the behavior that we want to accelerate value creation? Period. And then this one here, a clear strategic plan is all we need to get on the same page. See a lot of senior leadership teams go through a pretty robust strategy session. And there's a few that really look at it and they take it serious, but the majority don't even really talk about it much afterwards. And the goal here is to go through strategy and then cascade all the elements to every functional group, department, team within the organization appropriately, so we can actually execute on it. And I always tell the teams when we go through a strategy planning process, and especially when they say, wow, this was fantastic, what an incredible session, we really hit a home run. I said, yeah, congratulations, we're 3% of the way there, because 97% is actually executing on it. And it's not just executing on the plan, it's iterating in real time for the constantly changing things that are going on in the markets that we're serving out there. So strategies have to be living and breathing, and just having a nice intellectual conversation doesn't mean a lot if you can't execute on it, that's for sure. Okay, putting leaders through a leadership development program will cause better results to happen. And I've spoken to collectively, probably over the years, tens of thousands of leaders. And I always ask the question, when you go back a year from today, the leadership training that you went through, can you point to any measurable improvements in your numbers today from what you got out of that training? And at the most I've ever had go up in a room of 100 or more is 2 hands. And when I ask them questions about that, they really don't have anything that is measurable around it. It's just, I think it's better, essentially. So what's really important in leadership development programs, and in our view, is we need to see how they do the work. We need to see what they're measuring, how they're aligning with other teams, how they're collaborating. And after an amount of time, now you can see where all the gaps are, both in how they show up and their capabilities around actually doing the job. And then you can really do surgical leadership development with those individuals. And we see giant step changes in their performance and how their most important numbers move, other important leading measures that go into that. how they show up for their teams, the energizing environment that they create. So pretty interesting there too. And then this one here, an operating system will solve all operational problems. So not sure what most of you use, but there's a lot of popular operating systems out there from a management standpoint. It could be EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system, could be OKRs, 40X, scaling up. There's literally thousands that consultants have put together. But the challenge with most of those is that they actually make process more important than what is most important, if that makes sense. And if you have a star in the room, they'll never let you look away from what the North Star is and the value of the team that organization is supposed to create. But most with an operating system will make sure they're checking all the boxes and often doing a lot of things that really aren't creating value. And one of the things that I learned is that traditional goal setting, I've never seen it stand the test of time. And I would love to talk with any of you if you've got an example of where it really stood the test of time, because typically it's everybody create 1 to 3 or 4 goals a quarter, get it approved by your manager, follow up on it, go through that whole process, and then rinse and repeat and keep stacking that up. The question I have, and I was able to drive traditional goal setting, but it was a Herculean effort. And that's why what I did that I passed off around 2011 to my friends that wanted our results didn't work for them, is it takes too much effort to drive that all the way to the front line. And anytime I backed off even a little bit, you could see people drifting away from it. And so I've just come to the conclusion that traditional goal setting doesn't stand the test of time. And it's not how teams really want to work together. And so we're going to get into that here in a little bit. But process should never be more important than what's most important. When it comes to quality, you better check all the boxes to make sure there's no safety issues or anything else that goes with it. But from a management standpoint, it has to always be focused on what's most important. So in this methodology, let me shorten this up here. So I'm not sure if my Zoom boxes will be covering up the slide. So in this methodology, we call it the most important number and drivers methodology. So that's the most important number is the acronym MEN that's here. And every organization at the top has one most important number. In the for-profit world, it's going to be some version of profit. It could be cash flow if it's a capital intensive business. But for the most part, it's EBITDA, net operating profit, net profit, something like that. And then each of the senior leaders has a team, and their team will have a most important number. And as you cascade down towards the front line, each one of those teams will have a most important number. And then for each most important number, let's see here. There we go. For each most important number, they'll have a list of drivers. And the drivers are work that they can leverage to improve the most important number. So at the top of an organization, their drivers will be things that holistically affect the entire organization. Senior leadership teams should be making decisions that cause better results to happen by creating a better environment where everybody can be as successful as they choose to be. They have the right tools, right leadership, right incentives, all that kind of stuff, right structure. And each of these drivers that they're working on, they'll continually set action items that are meaningful actions to drive this in the right direction. And then from there, how do they meet? And we're gonna look at some real live examples here of what this looks like in just a few minutes with a living, breathing company that's actually deploying this right now. The shortest part of the meeting would be the check-in. And in the check-in, we have every team member celebrate wins. They share information that the team should know so they can make better decisions. And they get actionable help if they need the entire team's input on it. But what we don't want to have is a meeting with a whole bunch of 2 or 3 person meetings over the course of 60, 90 minutes or longer. The thing that's important about celebrating wins is that we get everybody thinking about that. It's a really nice positive energy, and we're defining what winning looks like, et cetera. They're building their own voice. There's so many teams that we work with where they say there's usually 2 or 3 people that dominate. We show up, and if they have a question, we'll answer it. This way, everybody has to go. And then sharing information so the team can make better decisions. I mentioned it earlier, sometimes when people check in, there's oversharing, it's too much, and then everybody else checks out. we're building a muscle here to come to the meeting to say, if the rest of my team knew this, they can make better decisions to create even more value. And initially the information isn't really that good, but now you know exactly where they're at. And as a leader, we can be developing them to share information that people really can use to make better decisions. And then the majority of the meeting is going to be spent on improving what's most important. And whatever's most important, it's always typically going to go to one most important number, drivers, and the work they're actually doing to improve it as they go through.
And Lee, can you jump
Now,
back to that last slide one more
yeah,
time? So
absolutely.
something else that really helps our teams be efficient with the 25% of the time is that we have them check in 24 hours ahead of the meeting. And so if everybody checks in and enters their information a day in advance, then an hour or so before the meeting, you can go in and see and comment and help each other out. So literally that check-in takes 15, 20 minutes, and then you're already diving into the real meat of the meeting.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You know, sometimes check-ins just take forever. We never get to what's most important. But if we all have access to it before the meeting, we do hit the ground running, spend the majority of the time on what's most important.
Yeah.
So when you roll this out, really important that any team you work with, and we typically will work with, start with a senior leadership team and cascade the alignment all the way through, but it really doesn't matter which team. But it's important to have, to get this thing launched, 8 weekly meetings where you're going through this methodology, and then whatever the appropriate cadence is after that, but at least one monthly check-in to make sure that they're doing the right work at the right time in the right order as they go through it. So really important to make that happen. And what's interesting about this is I've personally done this work with teams about, let's go back even 3 years. And today when I check in and there's been zero maintenance from my team, myself, with those companies or those teams, they're still doing it. It just works. And so that's really great. And back to traditional goal setting, I've never seen that stand the test of time this way. It just doesn't happen. It kind of turns into show up, put out whatever fire needs to be put out, but not a real systemic approach to creating value faster. So the typical journey that organizations go on when they do this, the only reason I put this slide in here is to say that once you have that foundational system in place, everybody's talking most important number, drivers, actions, how they meet, how they talk about it. The framework's the same across all teams. But the work they do is going to be a little to significantly different because of their functions. But once you do that, everything gets easier. Strategic planning gets easier and more effective. Deploying an intentional culture gets more effective. Rolling it out throughout the organization becomes more effective. Leadership development, it's a little bit further down the road here, but leadership development way more effective because you can see all the gaps in performance and how they show up. Performance management, now we know exactly what we want to hold everybody accountable to, and then the compensation piece. How do we want to incent people to drive the right behaviors? Without a common operating methodology, all the rest of the stuff much more difficult, but you can take these elements and many more and drop it right into that mind methodology. So the right methodology, in our view, I mean, it really offers an approved way to create value, alignment around improving what's most important with your team or any team, a methodology to choose where to focus, how, where, and why to improve, how decisions are made and acted on. I remember early days on the aerospace side where people would have all of these ideas, and I would see employees getting really frustrated. Nobody's listening, to my ideas. And then we shifted over and said, for every single team, list every idea and calculate what the ROI is for doing it in terms of improving customer experience, internal or external, and profitability or profitability. And then all of a sudden, the higher value stuff floated to the top, and those that had lower value ideas weren't disappointed at all because we weren't getting to their stuff, because the higher value stuff getting done, they got bigger bonuses. The incentives were right to make sure that they did that. It's a way to connect strategy to culture and execution and results. Strategic planning and communication, contextualized, really surgical leadership development, sustainable performance management. I'll get into a couple of performance snapshots here. improve voice and clarity and focus of every single team member, because everybody gets to engage, everybody gets a voice, but it's not a basic tool like I've listed off here to the right. And the journey, you know, when you start on this methodology, pretty quick to get people up to speed. Within 2 weeks, they're operating meetings, they've got a most important number, they're developing a good set of drivers. And then it's not too far down the road before they're really looking for and finding the high value opportunities to execute against. And then the ultimate goal is to get to a place where everybody is just insisting on taking demonstrable action around these high value opportunities. Again, doing the right work at the right time in the right order as you go through it. And here's a concept that I really like. It's called eating and dreaming at the same time. So eating refers to getting really great short-term results with what you have to work with. And every day when we come in, we're doing that kind of work. Dreaming is doing work at the same time to get even better results in the future. At the top of an organization, ideally, what I believe is that the senior leadership team should be 80% or more of their time making decisions that will get better results in the future, and probably less than 20% of their time on the eating stuff, you know, day to day. An emergency could come up and they're going to spend 100% of that meeting on eating, but on average, I think it should be 80-20. And then for frontline teams, as you get closer to the front line, it could be 80 to 90% eating, eating on a regular basis, and then dreaming is only 10 to 20%. But I believe every single team should be taking some time, at least monthly, to do things to get a better result in the future, so we can sustain increasing the value that we are creating as a team and collectively roll that up for the entire organization. You know, whether it's for-profit, nonprofit, government, doesn't matter. What's most important will be different. The rules are a bit different, but we haven't seen one instance where there isn't a most important number that applies to a team, not even one.
Actually, can I pop in one more time? Sorry.
Of course. Or 5 more times, go for it, yeah.
What I found too, just from working with teams, I'm working with a lot of functional teams right now, and the concept of dreaming is kind of foreign to them because they're so busy just in the work, moving so fast, getting things done. And so when I come in for the monthly check-in, it's wonderful because that is the time where, you know, they have all these great ideas of automation or just different ways we could be doing it, but they don't, it's hard to find those opportunities to lift their heads up and say, you know, I have an idea that could save us a ton of time in the future. So what I love about the eating dreaming is they actually start using the language like I have a dream and you know they come up with this fantastic idea and the whole team gets to really rally around it and decide whether or not it could be viable. Does it support the most important number and the driver? And it's just really wonderful when they start making that transition from 100% eating to dabbling in the dreaming space. And it's really amazing what they come up with, because it's just these fantastic ideas just sitting here, you know, waiting to be leveraged. So
yeah, that's a really great point. And I've heard a lot of leaders say that the closer you get to the front line, those employees just can't do that stuff. And that's not my experience at all. Every single employee can bring more value, every employee. And I remember on the aerospace side, employees that were in the $8 to $12 an hour range were coming up with ideas that were saving, you know, $4,000 to $20,000 a year. And if you have 500 employees looking for this stuff every single month, it's pretty darn incredible. You know, that's why we did so well in an exit and why we were as profitable as we were. They were doing it. We even set a goal one year. We want to uncover 25% capacity inside operations. And that would have meant 140,000 hours of time that we could have uncovered and filled in with additional work. In that year, it was 2012, we uncovered 200,000 hours. It was 100 people we didn't have to hire. Everybody got bigger bonuses. We still hired because we grew right through it. It was an incredible year. But it's amazing what you can collectively do when you think about this eating and dreaming concept and how we applied it. I mean, just amazing. All right, so this one, I think most of you have seen this, and I just love it. Management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things going through, and that's a lot of what we've been talking about here. And all right, so we're one slide away from getting into a real world example. So for consistent success, what we're advocating is that every team needs one most important number that above all others says they're winning or losing the game. There may be 5 or 25 additional measures, but there's one that everything should be geared towards, all their actions, goals, etc., geared towards improving. They should have a list of drivers or work that they should fundamentally be really good at doing that they can leverage to improve the number. And they need to have operating meetings that consistently improve how they do the work, make decisions, and execute. And all of this stuff has to be their own. So what I'm going to show you here in a couple of minutes with a live account, every single most important number, every single driver, every action, everything going in the meetings is their work. They collectively come up with it. They decide how well they do the work today, and they decide which things to focus on. So I think a couple of things are wildly important here. You know, we need to help teams do something they already want to do. They need to feel successful because it works. Super important. We need to increase motivation. We do that by making it their work. It's important to guide them and how to think about this stuff, but they're the ones that need to be in that meaty conversation to make it happen. And we need to make it easy to sustain and scale. And that's where the tools really, I think, come into play. But if the methodology isn't right, the tools won't matter at all. So let me end this show. Excellent. And I'll get into this live example here. So this is a McDonald's franchise locally, and they have 1,400 employees. And these ring segments represent the structure of the entire organization going through. So the center ring is the top level of the organization. Then it kind of goes out to one of the directors who has 3 patch supervisors, or basically territory managers, and they have restaurants below. Now, when we started with this team, this would have been, we've worked with quite a few teams over there, but this goes all the way back in time. Each one of these dates here is a weekly meeting that the senior leadership team has had. So February 19, 2020 is when we started. So what a crazy time within a month of that, right? Last year. Now, most drive-throughs did incredibly well, you know, just because of the nature of the pandemic, but they were 10% ahead of the market for the entire year, and they just took a giant step ahead of that, ahead of 14,000 restaurants on average. I mean, just incredible. So each one of these dates are meetings that they've actually had. And so when I come in here and I look at any one of them, I'll just go to 419. I haven't been part of this. There's 2 meeting topics. There's checking in and there's improving what's most important. So when I come over here, I can see the check-in around what's the biggest win, new store, yay, that's fantastic. What information does the team need to know so they can make better decisions, and where does this person need quick actionable help? And so all of this information, like Cindy pointed out, is typically put in the day before. So 10, 15 minutes before the meeting, you can read all this, formulate questions. You can take more time if you want. But the check-in only takes, for a team this size, maybe 15 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, maybe. But it's really cool to have all of this information. And then you can go back in time to other meetings and see everything. They'll take actions in the meeting. This team typically, if they don't get something done, they don't change the date. They just leave it what it is. But you can make this date whatever you need it to be. And then when they go to work on what's most important, here's the top of the organization. What is the most important number? It's pre-debt cash flow. That's how they measure it. There are other measures that they take a look at, and there's dashboards everywhere in here, probably hundreds of KPIs. But here's what's most important to them. And we started working with them back February of 2020, bouncing along, again, 10% ahead of the market, and all the foundation that was laid in this first year, they just took a giant jump up. And this is collective for the entire organization and where they're at. Wildly successful. Super happy with this. This is going to allow us to go out and find 25 more stores because of the performance that we have. And then at the top level, they have drivers like people development, hiring and retention, voice of the customer, labor and scheduling, people culture. These are drivers that holistically affect the entire organization. The senior team actually came up with it. And the senior team, at any point in time, they go through and they rank on a scale of 1 to 10, and we have a description of what that looks like, how well are we leveraging each of these drivers today? And so they'll move this around based on however they describe that. So when you get into it and you're looking at the about, they're always describing what does a 10 or a 9 plus look like, and then we're constantly taking actions to drive in that direction. Even the ability to come in and say, what's the impact of not improving it on our most important number? What's the impact of improving it on most important number? And what's the difficulty of getting this to an 8 plus? And then they list action items that they're going after to move this in the right direction. So it's a way to stay hyper focused, and in the methodology, it's important to not have more than 1 to 3 drivers to focus on where you want to materially move how well you're leveraging it to influence the most important number. So this is the top of the organization. And then as you come down, you've got a couple of directors that we can go out. You know, I can look at what Jerry's doing over here. I can see his drivers, and he's meeting with his territory supervisors, and they're doing the work here. And then we come down and we're looking at the territory supervisors. We can see their collective number. We can see their drivers. We can see the work that they're doing. We can even jump in and look at all of their meetings and see what kind of information they're sharing, what kind of wins they're having, you know, et cetera. And then we get all the way down to the store level, you know, what's going on here. Again, just incredible jump in results across the board and the drivers that they're working on. So it's been a little over a year, and we're just into the store level, and all the employees now are in and doing performance reviews in the system. And this is kind of an interesting piece of it. When it comes to performance management, I wish I could see all your faces so you could put thumbs up or thumbs down, but who loves a performance review, right? I mean, if you met anybody, I see Bob's face is like, I don't know. Yeah, down, nobody likes it. So we do something we call a performance snapshot. So let me find somebody here. And so I'm in this person's people page. And again, they've said we can share this stuff. In a performance snapshot, there's only 3 goals that every employee has now. They have their team's most important number goal, they have their responsibilities goal, and they have a culture goal, and that's it. And so when the review goes, they'll have scoring criteria. Let me get right over here. So we'll say, you know, what for the team's most important number goal, what does a 5 look like, and what does a 1 look like, and everything in between. So they know exactly how they're going to be scored. And min target at the time we did this review, which would have been 8/13/20, they were 16.8 was the target, actual was 16.09, within 1% of plan, so he scored a 3. So super simple, knew exactly how they rescored. The team, during this review, the entire senior team's together, and they're providing feedback around what this individual does well and where they need improvement. And then we get over to the responsibilities, feedback around what this individual does well and improvement opportunities. And then same thing over here, what are the responsibilities? And so for the director, these are responsibilities, outcome-based, that they're held accountable. So they know exactly what's expected going through and where they stand 100% of the time. And the entire senior team gets to give them feedback in the room. And then they get to the culture goal. So what makes up culture over here? And we get into that. And so they have their culture, they have a vision, they have their mindset, the AGK heart scoring criteria. So for culture, we're basically saying if you're not a cultural fit, deduct a point. 1 point, and you stop and you have a different conversation. If yes, you get 2 points. Are you living our alignment tools to the benefit of our internal, external stakeholders? I mean, intentionally doing it. If not at all, with no stories, no backup, add 0 points. If yes, 1 or 2, depending on how well. 3rd bullet point, are you intentionally influencing others to live these alignment tools to the benefit of our internal, external stakeholders? No intentional evidence or stories, add 0 points. If yes, add a point. And then which of these alignment tools do you live the most and why, and which ones offer opportunities for improvement? So it's an incredible conversation. all the employees are having this conversation around these 3 goals once a month in their one-to-ones, and then twice a year they're doing these reviews. And then there's always a summary at the end. Where would we like you to focus going forward? And here's the 4 bullet points. And so far, 100%, lots of employees going through this. Wow, was that great? Super supportive, super developmental. Whole team was involved. If I need help, they know exactly where I'm at and they can help me. So curious to get your take on that as well on the Q&A part that's coming up here in about 5 minutes. And so the methodology, what's really important is that every single one of these teams, these segments, the restaurants, have that most important number, have the drivers. If something's off track, what's going on over here in terms of that number? What's the work that they're doing? Are they not doing the right actions? What are they talking about in the meetings? In literally minutes, you know everything that's going on with a team. And I mean, I'm curious, which of your organizations could you look across the board and be able to see that? And so that's one of the really cool things about this and how we're driving the methodology. So to close out with a couple of slides, and then we'll go to the Q&A piece of it. It really is about getting teams to work better together and improving what's most important. And I applaud any honest effort in any organization to increase how the organization or its teams create value. But it's really around, organizing our thoughts, organizing the work we can do, and then doing the work that we should do, the right work at the right time, in the right order. And in sort of summary here, there is no silver bullet. It's work, but man, can it be fun. When teams start really winning, it's just fun. And you're not sort of pushing them to keep them going. And I always like to use a metaphor, we're sort of water skiing behind them, and which is the best place to be for leaders and with their teams. And how you do the work, wildly important. Maybe even more so in terms of what you're working on. And if we can't find some sort of simple, sustainable changes to how teams approach work, it will break down. If there's not an operating methodology that feels right. And I always ask that question of leaders, what do you think it feels like for your team to go through your goal setting process year after year, whatever it is? And I ask the team members, what does it feel like? And it's almost always a check the box exercise because they were told to do it. This feels completely different going through it. And it is fun. It's fun work. I mean, it's just incredible. And in short, application trumps theory. Everybody loves talking about stuff. It's super interesting. So few can apply it. And I would argue that most speakers can't go do what they speak about within an organization because they're so disconnected from actually doing the work. And then in the presentation that you downloaded, if you'd like to get a copy of the Mind Methodology Playbook, just go to this website here, this URL, maxyourmin.com. And from there, you can download a copy and love your thoughts on that. So with this, I will stop sharing. Cindy, were there a couple of points that you want to add it as I went through this? I know you were taking notes over there pretty quickly. I was watching that.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I wanted to make sure to bring up was it really changed the way I was doing my work. So as an example, I was working with a manufacturing company last year and doing a lot of inefficiencies type work with them, capturing it and making improvements. And I was interning with ETW at the same time. So I sort of married those two projects together. And my work with my client was, 100-fold easier and more fun. And I had such great transparency into what everybody was working on because it was a fast moving, fast growing company. And it was just, it really changed the way I did my work compared to how I used to do it in the past. So I love how it complements the quality journey so well, because I love that. I love quality work, and I love the project base up part of it, but this actually makes it sustainable over such a longer period of time. So I wanted to make sure to share that piece. It is really fun. I enjoy watching very tactical teams start to become more strategic, and watching the senior leadership teams who are kind of disconnected, not intentionally, but see them get connected to the work being done is super rewarding. It's just really rewarding. So
Yeah, it's nice to tie all the work together because that's really what it's about.
Yeah.
And when you have a company with 10 leaders in it or 1,000 leaders, you almost end up with 10 to 1,000 slightly different to significantly different ways of doing work with the teams. And so when you move around the organization, you have to learn, well, how does this leader do it? And what goes on with this team over here with a common language and methodology for going after the work. It makes it super easy. Hey, what's our most important number? What's the work we're doing? Give me something to do. I've got some ideas. Let's go for it. I can get ready for the meeting. I can hit the ground running almost immediately, as opposed to sometimes weeks or months to get up to speed over there.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious, Thomas, you were in the breakout room with us. This is something that's important to you as fast as you guys are growing and all the responsibilities you have. What were your takeaways from this?
Well, it's pretty significant change, in the company that I work for is so large, and it has such a precedence in some of these performance management methodologies. I can see how this would be a fun, cool thing to apply if you had a little bit more autonomy. So that's one of the things it crossed my mind.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the smallest company using it has 1 employee, sole proprietor. The largest has 40,000 employees.
Mhm.
So it kind of works just about everywhere. It makes it super easy to connect the Lego blocks all the way out. And it's important that each most important number, when improved, supports the next one to the top.
Yeah.
So love to get some feedback or questions from the rest of the group. And I'm also interested, Cindy and I are interested in, what do you think your team's most important number would be? So any questions or feedback, and maybe if you don't mind, just put in the chat, what do you think your most important number would be? Actually put that in the chat.
So John, this is Bob Mitchell. I was just curious, do you find that majority of your most important numbers are a leading indicator or a lagging indicator? Something directly that the team can influence, or something that, it's part of the total organizational effort?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's virtually always a lagging indicator, an indicator of the value that we created. So at the top, it could be, net profit, for example. For the finance department, it could be cash flow, because their job is to give people information to make better decisions that drive improvements in cash flow and profit. HR, my favorite, most important number is % seats filled with capable people. A lot of HR teams will say, they'll start with, well, it's employee turnover. Well, you could have a turnover over at 0, and there's 40% of the people that shouldn't be there. They're not performing above the water line. So if you have 1,000 employees, 100 open seats, and 100 seats that they're filled with people that they're not in the right seat, they can't get those results. It's not their fault. They're just placed wrong. Then your number there would be 80%. So as you cascade all that stuff to the front line, it's the one number that says, if you put all your family's money into that team and you want to get a return on investment for your future retirement, it's a number that would tell you you're winning or losing that game. It's not always financial. It can be whatever that is, but it always supports the next level up. So great question. And then they'll measure lots of leading indicators. So we know if these go awry, our most important number is going to fall down in 3 weeks, 6 months, whatever that ends up being.
Well, that's interesting, because here in the Phoenix section, by all of ASQ's measures, we are one of the most active sections in all of ASQ. Now, as a not-for-profit organization, and all of our member leaders are volunteers, I would think that I'm pretty confident that our most important number from ASQ's perspective is member retention. That's a lagging indicator, and that's a measure of how well we implement things, how effective we are. And despite ASQ's recognition that we are one of the most active sections, and even feedback from our members indicate that their overall satisfaction with the section is 85+%, which is a very good number. Yet our member retention is actually going the wrong way, and so it's frustrating at times.
Yeah. And that would, Bob, that would be an interesting conversation to have, because We have a ton of nonprofits that are our customers too, and their most important number is impact, and it could just be lives impacted or served depending on what they do, but it's impact. And then a measure that they're going to look at would be, revenue. How much money is coming in, because we need money to finance the impact that we want to have. They're inextricably sort of linked. But I would think the most important number for ASQ would be somewhere in the ballpark of the impact we have on members, because if they get enough value out of it, they'll never leave, and they'll tell all their friends, you need to be here. Look at the community that we're building. I like the emotion, called shine. We get to show what we're doing. We get to help other people. We get to mentor. We get to be mentored. So I think the most important number is going to be somewhere in the value that we create for the members. Then retention isn't a problem. Growth is happening. All kinds of great things are going on. I mean, there's so much we can do to help each other, and there's no end to it. So this is just a small version of what that conversation looks like, and it's fascinating to think about that.
Great, thank you.
Lee, if I can ask a question, I work in a project execution environment. So we have, project teams, all the professionals are involved in multiple project teams, but in a cross-discipline, cross-functional team, you have an engineer record for electrical, engineering record for civil, environmental, structural. Would a cross-functional team like that actually latch onto one most important number, or would they carry different most important numbers because of their discipline focus?
They will have different things that they measure, but if this is a project, and I'm assuming what you mean is we're going to install this installation of utility, solar at scale, right?
Right.
So you're going to do that. So your company's a for-profit company, right? You're not a nonprofit. Okay. Right. So typically the most important number is going to be some version of the return on that project. So at the end of it, if we say we want a margin of 70%, 80%, or maybe there's recurring revenue afterwards for maintenance and everything else, what is the total value that we're going to get out of it? And if we're late on the project and we're doing things over and there's lots of quality defects and everything else going in, we could spend 20, 30% more on it than we thought. So that cross-functional team that you're talking about, our most important number is the best return or the return on that project. And however you want to measure it, there's a number of ways to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and we do have, some critical measures like that over the life cycle of a project that you'll get more accurate reveal as you go. But I just don't know how relevant it is to all the individuals, that are doing a slice of the pie, like the safety director or the environmental specialist consultant on this project.
To your point, for the project, there'd be a most important number, which is around return. For each of the functions, they would also have their own most important number and set of drivers. Right. Whoever's leading safety, whoever's leading quality, engineering, et cetera. Right. But when their numbers improve, it improves the next one up, and each might have an additional 5 to 30 measures that they look at that support.
Okay, yeah. That having multiple multiple measures that do align to each other, cascaded fashion, makes sense. I wasn't sure if that was part of your solution.
It is, yeah. Okay. And again, you create the top level for the project, and you've got these sub teams or plans, right. And you could have sub teams or plans to that, and that's how it all sort of links and connects together going through.
Okay, very good. Thanks.
Oh, very welcome. So all right, so it can't just be Thomas. So I'm sure somebody else has a question. Go ahead, Cindy.
If there isn't a question, it might be helpful for them to hear the story about the engineering team and how we broke the engineering team into the 3 lanes with their own plans. That might be a relevant part.
Yeah, sure. So we have a manufacturing client with an engineering team, and it's identical in terms of what they're going after, what I did on the aerospace side. So the engineering group, there were 3 ways that they created value for the organization. There were new products that were developed. There was manufacturing engineering to make this stuff to a place where we could actually produce it. And then there were improvements in operations and how we processed everything. So the way they created value at the top for engineering was growth and gross profit over time. Engineering, they were the great sort of enablers of our growth with the new products, refining what we had and everything else, so we can grow like crazy and optimize and make more margin over time on all these projects. And there was a lot of moving parts. But for the engineering team, the most important number was growth and gross profit. And we measured on a trailing 12-month average, sort of rolling along. And then there were 3 sub plans around new product development, manufacturing engineering, and operational improvements. And on the new product side, we wanted to make sure that if we wanted to grow 20% next year, and we had about probably 15, 16 years straight of better than 20% compounded annual growth before I sold it, we need at least that much work in the hopper to drop in at any point in time to ensure that that kept happening. And then they were constantly improving margin on these products. We'd have a product come in at maybe only 15, 16% gross profit, but we knew when engineering got done with it, it could be 12 months, 24 months, it would be 85% margin. So that's another way to think about it. Every team in an organization by design should be creating value that rolls up, and we create more value as an entire organization. You know, I think on the government side, you know, thinking, you know, Hillary is an example with the city of Phoenix, it's customer experience and it's return on taxpayer investment. And what are we doing there to get better and better at that, you know, per unit, you know, personally, how are we making it a better place to learn, live, work, and play? That's sort of the environment that we're creating, or the impact that we want to have. And so most important numbers in that space sort of, you know, go there with the teams. All right,
Well,
so Bob, yeah.
Not seeing any questions for the chat. I guess
Okay.
I want to thank you,
I got a
Lee and
question.
Cindy. Oh, we have we have a question for Jim.
Yeah, go Jim.
Go ahead, Jim.
So I'm involved with a startup. We're a medical device company, and we had metrics set up for the year, and our business model completely changed in the first quarter of the year, where we're doing 3D printing of medical devices. We've gone to custom devices, so our cycle time was 2 months, maybe. Now our cycle times are down to 7 days. Completely different. It's all custom parts for, you know, patient specific, and also we've also entered into the dental market. And so, how do you sort of manage the balance of the growth, not by too much? You know, how you control that growth coming in and still maintain the growth pattern we're going to with sales, which is really starting to skyrocket.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing about this methodology, and you got to see one example, you know, in this restaurant chain. But the nice thing about the methodology is it makes the strategy living and breathing, and it changes as fast as you need it to going through. And I've had years where I think when we hit about $9.5 million, the next year we grew to $20 million. We grew really fast on the aerospace side. Boy, was that a Herculean effort to make that happen. But this kept everybody aligned. Everybody knew they're there to create value, because you're thinking about, in your case, you know, think outcomes. We want to make money, whatever it is, each team, the outcomes, but then think structure and its allocation of resources, the right pieces to come together to create the value that's in front of you. And that includes in that structure roles and responsibilities, could be location, could be strategic alliances, agreements, and then think people and how they actually fit into it. So this allows you to look at those 3 elements in real time and adjust. And what a great position that you're in. I love those environments.
It's fun, for sure.
Totally fun. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. It's always fun to be in a new high growth area. Well, thank you very much, Lee and Cindy, and again to all of our attendees tonight. Please, if you have the opportunity, download the presentation from Lee. That's available on our website, and click on the link, get more information and like a sample of the Mind application. And also thank you again, everybody, for your participation in the chat session, the networking session. I do want to close up with a few slides, but again, thank you very much, Lee and Cindy. Just as a wrap up, then for the remaining couple of minutes that we have, this presentation has been recorded, so we will put it. We're having difficulty for some reason. For the first couple of months, it worked fine. Now, more recently, we're having problems uploading our Zoom presentation to WebEx. I don't know if they're doing something behind the scenes and making it more difficult to put one platform's files on another platform, but we will make it available for viewing after the fact on our YouTube page. So we will be putting out an announcement on where you can find that, both in our newsletter and on our website. So please, when you do get the event satisfaction survey and thank you email from John Linlin, our VOC chair, please participate in that survey. Let us know how we're doing. And if you have any ideas or suggestions for future programs, I'm sure Vic Nanda would appreciate your input. Next month, on June 10th, our presentation will be on the topic of artificial intelligence applications in quality, kind of a take on what will be the quality profession, what will it look like in the 2020s and beyond. Our speaker will be Amitabh Saxena from Annexus, and he is a previous WCQI conference speaker. And one other note, there is a free webinar available on May 28th. I was mentioning to the people who had not gone off to one of the breakout rooms. We've had a lot of questions the past several meetings about how, what are some best practices around virtual audits? How do they work? How do I do them? So this is a webinar not presented by ASQ, but by an aligned organization called Greenlight Guru. They specialize in ISO quality management systems for healthcare and medical devices. So I put a link here for the webinar, and it's on May 28th. It's free, starts at 10 o'clock. And these are some of the topics that they will cover, talking about audits pre and post COVID and some of the key learnings and significant issues. And again, we do have a pretty good presence on the various social media sites. So if you want to stay connected with us, please feel free to check out our Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and or YouTube accounts, as well as our website. So with that, I want to thank everybody for your participation tonight. And I wish all of you a great evening and a healthy year to come. And thank you everyone again for your participation. Thanks, you, Lee. Thank you, Cindy.
Thanks, Lee.
Thank you, Bob. Nice to see you again.
Yes, nice to see you again too. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
So Bob,
Yes.
my husband would be